And immediately, Stanley Sanders stated it was an accident and he didn't mean to do it.
Huh. Now, the cops aren't playing. They've already brought the SBI in. I don't know if that's typical of a rape murder case, but it sounds like the cops are not playing with this. They're bringing out all the big guns.
Well, he says it was an accident, I didn't mean to do it, and that he wanted to tell about it. So Sanders said that he'd known the victim and had talked to her on the telephone, that he left his home on November the 10th after dark sometime and walked to Jackie Lee's home. He went around to the rear of the house where he watched her through a bedroom window. He came to the front of the house as I guess she was entering the porch, and she was like coming out the door, I guess, for some reason, and he grabs her. She starts screaming. He forces her around the side of the house to the rear. Jackie Lee fell, hit her head on the bench, because remember there was a picnic table and some blood out back. He told her that he needed some money. She said she had her pocketbook and that it was in the car around the front of the house. He forced her to get back up, to walk around. They crossed, the yard, went around between several houses, went down another street into a field. So he's not even really going for her purse.
Doesn't sound like it.
No. He removed his coat. He said they sat down, they began to talk, and then they started to have sex.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is his version of the story.
That sounds likely.
He says that after they had sex, Jackie Lee dressed herself, and they kept talking. And he saw a light on in the house, and he thought a man had been watching them, like I guess across from this park or this field where they are. So he decided to put the victim to sleep by using a chokehold he says he learned in the military, and that he was squeezing her neck until she went limp, and that he realized he choked her too hard, believed she was dead, that he thought he saw her move, and that's when he picked up the fence post and hit her in the head, and he wasn't sure whether or not she was dead, so he hit her again.
The fuck is wrong with this guy?
Yeah.
This sounds really accidental.
Yeah.
I mean, oops.
He didn't mean to do it.
Oops, I choked her till she fell out, and then she twitched, and I bashed her with a freaking fence post. Yeah, right. What a asshole.
So Sanders got up to leave, and he saw the moon reflect off of his gun, I guess, which at that point was on the ground. He says that he went back, he picked up the gun, fired one time toward Jackie Lee's chest, and that he had borrowed the gun from an acquaintance, and that after he shot Jackie Lee, he walked from the field over to his girlfriend's house, where he played cards and later went home to bed.
Wow.
Okay, so this story is really not adding up.
No.
It's like, hey, I grab her, I'm trying to take money from her, but I don't take the money.
And then we talk.
We have sex.
And she has sex with me.
And then I see a light on in a house, and I think somebody's watching us, so I'm going to...
I should choke her.
Choke her, beat her, shoot her. I mean, this just doesn't
Bullshit.
add up at all. Right. Well, I guess Stanley Sanders did admit to the SBI agent that he had been in Lee's residence before the 10th and had taken the jewelry. So he says that, yeah, I took the gold watch and the ring. So, it's kind of a weird thing because the mom's saying, no, it was taken at this time. And he's like, oh, no, I was in the house before that and took that stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure they believe him over the mom.
I mean, at this point, the guy's sort of spewing lots of different tales, So during the trial, there were several witnesses who testified that Stanley Sanders was at a Carver Street pool room that night. Well, a forensic psychiatrist from the Dorothea Dix Hospital did testify and say that he thought that Stanley Sanders was competent enough to stand trial, and that he had been functioning well enough at the time of Lee's murder to be responsible for these actions. He did testify, though, this doctor, that Stanley Sanders suffered some significant mental illness, possibly a paranoid schizophrenic, and that he diagnosed other identity disorders and antisocial traits, and that the guy, Stanley Sanders, had a pretty significant history of psychological problems.
Okay.
So, mentally ill guy, rapes and murders a girl. So,
Yet again, possibly untreated mental health issue. And, a lot of the antisocial traits and personality disorders are tied up, with psychopaths as well.
Yeah, that's true.
So, maybe he's just a fucking psychopath.
So in 1982, an all-white jury convicted Sanders and sentenced him to death.
Is Sanders black?
Yes.
Ah.
I should mention that.
Yes.
Well, he appealed this sentence, won a new trial, but then a second all-white jury put him back on death row. So because the U.S. Supreme Court threw out North Carolina's death penalty law, Sanders won a new sentencing hearing. So the guy ended up going, I guess, to trial like 4 different times over this.
Wow, and the state paid the cost each time to keep him in jail.
So initially, back in 1981, he denied the crime and for 28 years said he didn't have any part of it. He was innocent. He was being framed. And there was actually kind of a coalition, if you will, of people over in like Hendersonville, Brevard area who were attending all of his trials, supporting him, claiming that he was innocent. He'd been framed. It was an issue of racism, and not to say that those things don't happen.
Right.
So when he finally went back to court, which I guess would have been like the 4th time or so after all of these trials and retrials and appeals, he kind of abandoned that denial and he pleaded guilty to kidnapping a 17-year-old girl, 1981, and said that yes, he indeed raped and murdered her. So he was sentenced to death again for the rape and first-degree murder of Jackie Lee. And, so this story just kind of keeps going.
Now, did he have is there some type of motivation for him to finally confess to it? Like a lighter sentence or something like that?
Yeah, I don't think so. He went to Central Prison in Raleigh. He began serving that life sentence, or at least 25 years, while he awaited a 4th sentencing trial. So, he's waiting, he's in prison, and, he's probably not going to get out, so...
No, but it sounds like he moved from death row to life.
Yeah.
So I guess that maybe is his motivation there.
Yeah. So I guess during this last trial, because, again, it was like he was sentenced to death, appealed that, sentenced to death row again. Then, there's some new law that comes out. He appeals that sentence and then ends up, having
life.
Two more trials, I guess. And he does get life. But, at this time, it's much later, they decided to do some DNA testing of a rape kit just to make certain they had the right man.
Right.
And as I said, there was like a whole kind of coalition of folks who were rallying behind him, supporting him, saying, oh, he's innocent. He didn't do this. And the DNA test confirmed that he was the perpetrator. So he did rape her and murder her.
So he was using those people as well.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't care about anybody else.
I guess
it doesn't seem. But, I guess from their point of view, he's had multiple trials, that always raises suspicion about the validity of a case, in my mind anyway. Black, all-white jury, back in 81, things were different. And so, I guess you can't blame those people for believing that.
Right.
Him keeping on saying he's innocent all these years.
Well, so they have changed the law, so now I guess they've moved it from the death penalty to life in prison. But, I guess North Carolina's execution laws have gotten a little murky, and some people think that, we may not be executing anybody in the state, like, ever again.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we got a lot of people sitting on death row, and nobody dying.
What does that do for families who the perpetrator was sentenced to death for killing their loved one?
Yeah, I don't know.
I see moving forward, hey, this is the new, this is how we're conducting ourselves now. But, should something like that be retroactive? I know it's a touchy subject, capital punishment, but I personally think if you're going to have a death penalty, it should be carried out. And, not
appeal
15 or 20 years later.
And appeal after appeal after
appeal.
like
Gacy lived longer on death row than some of his victims lived on this earth.
Right.
Things like that. So, if it's supposed to be the proponents say it's a deterrent for these very violent crimes. But if I, the perpetrator, can go make myself a life in prison, and these people tend to be crazy, psychopaths, some mentally ill, when they commit their crimes, which is sad, untreated mental illness, but they're antisocial anyway. So, being in prison and like making a life for yourself in there with a bunch of other tough nuts is not the worst case scenario for some of these guys. But I bet, by God, if you had a appeals process streamlined but fair, and then with DNA on top of that, sometimes proven beyond the shadow of a doubt, and your ass was dead 8 months, a year later, some of these people may think twice about these horrific crimes.
You think so?
Or not. But, what do I know?
Well, you can find us on Spreaker, Patreon. We're on Facebook, Twitter. You can also listen to us on SoundCloud, and we're on CastBox and Spotify. So keyword search Mountain Murders.
We have our new website.
That's right, we do. We have a new website, mountainmurders.com.
And just come on over
direct
and
to the
check
source,
it out.
Right?
Yes.
Straight to it.
And we're going to have a lot of extra content and stuff forthcoming there.